Welcome to the USU Colloquium for November. Dr. Eric Muenks is our presenter today. Eric Muenks obtained a PhD in industrial/organizational psychology from Capella University in 2004. He has been licensed in Florida as a mental health counselor since 1998. Dr. Muenks gained extensive experience through the 1990s and early 2000s, working both as a practitioner and a healthcare administrator, having served various roles in quality management, performance improvement, and regulatory compliance. He worked 16 years as a consultant with Volusia County, Florida schools, where he was active in evaluating their family support programs and providing training to school professionals regarding the needs of LGBTQIA+ youth. Dr. Muenks began teaching online part-time in 2007 and became a full-time faculty member with the Ashford College of Doctoral Studies, formerly University of the Rockies, in 2014. Over the past 17 years, he has taught online and on ground at multiple universities, including Rasmussen College, Colorado State University, Southern New Hampshire University, University of Phoenix, and most recently, California Southern University, where he spent 5 years chairing doctoral projects, most of which involved systematic literature review. Dr. Muenks has been privileged to offer numerous trainings to graduate students and doctoral faculty in evidence synthesis methods, including systematic reviews, and has been honored to assist dozens of students with successfully implementing this methodology for their doctoral research projects. Dr. Muenks is the program director for the College of Business and Technology at USU. Welcome, Dr. Muenks.
Thank you so much, Linda, and welcome everyone. Pleased to be here today, honored to be talking about this topic of evidence synthesis methods and specifically the systematic literature review. A few things that I wanted to just sort of say from the onset. This presentation is not focused on helping guide one through the steps involved in a systematic literature review. Rather, my aim is to help us understand the systematic literature review as a form of evidence synthesis research, to differentiate a systematic literature review from some of the other forms of literature review that we're probably most familiar with, and also just talk about the most common types of systematic reviews that are occurring for the purpose of creating knowledge to demonstrate proficiency in research methodology and knowledge creation for doctoral programs. As Linda mentioned, I have served doctoral students pretty much exclusively over the last 5 years before I joined United States University with an institution, California Southern University. They offer PsyD degrees in clinical psychology, and one of the pathways to completing their doctoral project is the evidence synthesis approach. They allow things such as systematic reviews and scoping reviews. So it was about 8 years ago, I would say, that I crashed course myself in understanding what is this systematic literature review, how does it differ from the typical second chapter or review of the related literature that we see in a traditional dissertation or doctoral project. And at the time that I kind of crashed course myself in this methodology, or in these methodologies rather, there was a lot of disagreement and perhaps some confusion at the institution where I was working about what is a systematic literature review? Is it a theoretical study? Is it a qualitative approach? So this presentation is aimed at kind of illuminating answers to all of those questions. Before I start, I just want to say that this approach to research has just really gained steam in the last 30 years, I would say, in particular. There's been, of course, as we know, a proliferation of access to information via the internet, access to research, right? We don't have to go to the physical libraries anymore. And just access to literature in general, including gray literature. With the onset of the pandemic, A lot of researchers shifted to the systematic literature review approach or to evidence synthesis approaches because of issues with implementing studies that involved direct contact with human participants when that was something that was not possible or difficult to manage during the pandemic. So there are a lot of systematic reviews out there that have just recently been done in the last 4 years. So let's talk about what is evidence synthesis methodology. So this refers to a set of systematic approaches used to gather, evaluate, and integrate findings from multiple studies to create knowledge, to provide a comprehensive understanding of a particular topic or research question. The goal of evidence synthesis methodology is to collate and summarize existing evidence to make it more accessible, reliable, and useful for decision-making, as well as policy development and other research. It's really born out of medical sciences. That's probably the biggest takeaway that I could state in terms of the history of the method. So let's talk a little bit about some of these decisions that can be informed by evidence synthesis methods. So they can be clinical or social or practical. So, and on the clinical side, we have health research, be it in the medical sciences and behavioral health. On the social and practical side, we see more and more systematic reviews being conducted in the fields of education as well as business. Systematic reviews really sort of gained prominence in the 70s, although we have evidence of systematic reviews being conducted all the way back to the mid 20th century. The meta-analysis is probably the most, arguably the most frequently and renowned, frequently performed and most renowned form of evidence synthesis methodology. And the meta-analysis as an approach in and of itself kind of went through 3 phases of development. So in the 70s, the term was coined by Gene Glass, and Glass's work informed educational psychology and helped popularize the method of meta-analysis, especially for synthesizing research on the effectiveness of psychotherapy. So during the 80s and 90s was a second period of growth around meta-analyses because statistical tools became more widely available to help synthesize research in the meta-analysis. And then we have the modern era where we are today, and there are schools of thought as well as think tanks and tools that are more widely and commonly available. We'll talk about some of those in this presentation today, PRISMA being the acronym that we'll dive into most specifically. So we have the systematic literature review, and I start with this particular type of evidence synthesis methodology because it's become an umbrella term for a lot of systematic reviews, including meta-analyses. So I'm going to present to you some of the sort of common current terminology and differentiate each of these approaches based on their focus, their method, and their goals, to try to keep it simple, right? And there's an acronym, SLR, that we see widely used in research literature. So the focus of a systematic literature review is a broad synthesis of either qualitative or quantitative studies. So it can include one or the other. And the method focuses on comprehensively searching, critically appraising evidence that's available. It may include both types of data, quantitative and qualitative, but it typically doesn't combine them. And the goal of a systematic literature review is to summarize evidence to answer a research question. So this has become the umbrella term for things like meta-analyses, but also things which we'll talk about in a couple of slides, the qualitative systematic literature review, and a term that's gaining more and more traction known as the integrative systematic literature review. And what I've observed is that the integrative systematic literature review is most frequently used now in doctoral programs, particularly clinical psychology programs, business programs, and education. So the meta-analysis, which I referred to earlier, the focus is only on quantitative studies with comparable data, right? So they're looking at someone who's conducting a meta-analysis is looking at studies that have pretty much examined the exact same independent, dependent variables. And there's a statistical pooling of data across studies in order to calculate an overall effect size so that the conclusions of a meta-analysis are really to form overarching conclusions about the effectiveness of a particular drug, intervention, or approach. And the goal is to quantify effects by combining results from similar studies. So another term that can be used interchangeably for the meta-analysis is a quantitative systematic literature review. But as I mentioned before, meta-analysis has become the term du jour. It's been that way since the 70s. So this folds nicely into what is a qualitative systematic literature review. So contrary to what one may think, that a qualitative systematic literature review relates to the kind of data analysis that are performed, really, a qualitative systematic literature review is a study where there are only qualitative studies used as evidence. So the protocol for a qualitative systematic literature review excludes mixed method studies, excludes quantitative studies, excludes other systematic reviews. The focus is purely on reviewing qualitative research that's existing and available. There's a systematic search and a thematic synthesis employed, where there's an integration of non-numerical data. So themes are identified. And really the goal of conducting a systematic review with only a review of qualitative studies is to identify themes and gain a deeper understanding of human experiences or complex issues, the kinds of things that qualitative studies focus on generally. So in my experience, I've hardly ever come across a research question that's linked to a demonstrated problem that would beg for a qualitative only systematic literature review, but there are those out there. There are times when research questions warrant us to search for what are the overarching lived experiences or complex issues that have been explored in the qualitative literature around a topic. And this brings me now to the buzz term of the day, which is the Integrative Systematic Literature Review, or the ISLR. This is different in that the focus is on looking at all kinds of available literature. Quantitative and qualitative studies can be used together. And the method involves systematically searching, appraising evidence across different study types, and then the analysis for an integrative systematic literature review, even though there are quantitative and qualitative studies examined, is thematic. So a thematic analysis is used to integrate all data. So this method provides a comprehensive multidimensional view by combining trends with contextual insights. So again, you don't limit the kind of research that you include in an integrative systematic literature review, but whereas in a meta-analysis, there's a quantitative statistical approach to analyzing the data, and in a qualitative only systematic review, there's a thematic analysis only employed. The integrative systematic literature review uses a qualitative thematic analysis to look at results from different types of studies. And to make things even more complex, there is something that is known as a mixed method systematic literature review, the MMSLR. This is also a review of both quantitative and qualitative studies. However, instead of it being a thematic analysis only or a quantitative analysis only, there's a separate synthesis of data types and an integrated analysis. So there may be a small meta-analysis of the quantitative data presented in research, along with the thematic analysis of qualitative data available in research. So this is done to provide a holistic understanding of a topic by combining the breadth of quantitative evidence, what is happening, with the depth and context provided by qualitative insights. In other words, why and how it is happening. Any questions so far about these methods? Any surprises? in learning more about these. All right, so we'll
I
move
don't see
along.
anything in the chat.
Great, thank you, Linda. Okay, so moving along, here's just a quick summary to help understand the differences between these types of reviews, and I'm using their acronyms. So the systematic literature review is broad synthesis. It's an umbrella term. The meta-analysis focuses only on quantitative research and uses a statistical analysis to analyze data. The qualitative systematic literature review only focuses on previous qualitative research, and the results produced are themes that align with research questions. Then we have the mixed method systematic literature review, where both types of data, both types of studies are looked at, and then there's a separate analysis of the quantitative and a separate analysis of the qualitative data and an integrated findings summary. And then finally, the integrated systematic literature review combines both data types and does a single solitary thematic analysis of data. And pardon me, I've got my notes in my hand. I don't like using the notes in PowerPoint. I find this much easier. Okay, so let's take a look at what PRISMA is. First of all, oh, here we go. Let's talk about what PRISMA is. I mentioned it earlier. So PRISMA stands for the Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. There's a website here that you can access, it's open to anybody. And the website produces not only checklists and extensions of PRISMA, so we'll talk about the two most common extensions of PRISMA in a second. There are also there's access on the PRISMA website to the explanation papers. So the research that went into developing PRISMA extensions and standards are accessible too. So PRISMA is a set of evidence-based guidelines designed to help researchers transparently and completely report systematic reviews and meta-analyses. It's widely recognized in health sciences and social sciences, and serves as a standard to ensure clarity and completeness of systematic review reporting. Using PRISMA ensures that readers, reviewers, and other researchers have enough information to evaluate the quality and reliability of a systematic review, promoting replicable and high quality research. So it's really an effort that was intended to streamline the reporting of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So we'll talk a little bit while we're on this slide about the history of PRISMA. It evolved from an earlier guidance known as Quorum, and Quorum was also an acronym that stood for Quality of Reporting of Meta-Analyses. It was first published in 1999, and then the Quorum was released around that same time. So even though the initial focus of PRISMA through Quorum was on meta-analyses, it eventually became apparent to the researchers that were involved in developing Quorum that there are other types of reviews that, other than meta-analysis, that beg for standardization. And so the first version of PRISMA was released in 2009 to improve upon Quorum, but also to extend the applicability of standards to systematic reviews other than meta-analyses. There have been multiple extensions of PRISMA released, and there are PRISMA extensions that help guide researchers in areas such as not only systematic reviews and meta-analyses, but also scoping reviews, which are another form of evidence synthesis that's used to map evidence on a particular topic. But there have been a couple of PRISMA extensions evolving in the last 15 years that are really important, in my view, to doctoral research. So one was the development of PRISMA P. We'll talk about that in a second. And the other was the development of the PRISMA 2020, which is currently the latest update to PRISMA standards. PRISMA isn't really owned by anyone. It is basically an international team of methodologists, health scientists, and guideline developers. It's a comprehensive collaboration that is known as the PRISMA Development Group. They have their own governing body. It's supported and endorsed by leading journals, academic institutions, and organizations. And it's especially relevant and endorsed in the health and social sciences, which often require PRISMA adherence for publication of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Let's go up here and look a little bit about what PRISMA, the two PRISMA protocols or the two PRISMA extensions that are most commonly used, and talk about how they differ. So we have the PRISMA P for protocols that I mentioned earlier. It was developed in 2015. If you go to the PRISMA website and search under PRISMA extensions, you can scroll down to PRISMA for protocols and you can find a copy of the PRISMA P checklist. You can also find the explanation papers that underscores the research that went into the development of the PRISMA P. So the purpose of the PRISMA P is really to develop and register, in many cases, protocols for systematic reviews. You would register a protocol for a systematic review for a couple of reasons. The most common would be if you intend to publish it, but also if you're interested in doing a complete novel systematic review, registering a protocol in advance can help you identify if there's another review that's similar or on the exact same topic. So PRISMA P focuses on planning stages. The way I look at it is PRISMA P helps guide the methodology chapter for a doctoral student who is intending to conduct a systematic review. So it's used during the planning stage for protocol development, whereas when we look at the PRISMA 2020, it's used after the review is completed. So we'll talk a little bit about why that may be. So the purpose of the PRISMA 20 is for reporting completed systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Its focus is on ensuring transparency, completeness, and accuracy in the reporting of the reviews, including the methods and findings. So the way I look at PRISMA 2020 versus PRISMA P is I would recommend the use of PRISMA 2020, particularly in the medical sciences, because it's more comprehensive checklist, but also if someone wants to take a systematic review and publish it, then PRISMA 2020 has additional standards that apply specifically to publication and the completeness of what would be expected in a scholarly journal for what contents need to be included in a systematic review. So it's used when writing and reporting the results of a completed systematic review or meta-analysis versus the P, which is used at the planning stage. But both of them focus on transparency and ensuring that there is a systematic design with clear and pre-specified protocols to minimize bias. Here are some other differences between these two checklists. So the PRISMA P for protocols is 17 items, whereas PRISMA 2020 is 27 items. Items 1 through 5 on the PRISMA P really relate to publication. And so when I'm guiding my doctoral students through the development of a protocol for their methodology chapter, I remind them that they can skip the first 5 items and apply them later on down the road if they intend to seek publication for their protocol. So we focus on items 11 through 17 in particular, or 6 through 17, which are 11 standards total. So again, there are 10 more items on the PRISMA 2020. And whereas the PRISMA P focuses on protocol elements such as the rationale for the review, this is kind of what feeds into the introduction and background for a problem statement. It also focuses on eligibility criteria, search strategy, and a data synthesis plan, making those things as transparent as possible. On the other hand, the PRISMA 2020 is applied after the systematic review is completed and ensures that the report covers all necessary elements comprehensively. So PRISMA P is used before the systematic review starts, guiding the development and the registration of the protocol. If registration of protocol is a goal, if publication is the goal, registration of the protocol, PRISMA P is necessary, and PRISMA P can ensure that you do that. And PRISMA P focuses on pre-review planning to ensure the rigor, whereas PRISMA 2020 focuses on full reporting of review processes and findings. So again, as I mentioned, PRISMA consists of checklists and also flow diagrams designed to improve the transparency, accuracy, and reproducibility of systematic reviews. The checklist guides researchers on reporting essential components, and that can be anything from the objectives and rationale, but definitely the search strategy has to be clearly spelled out according to PRISMA. Eligibility criteria must be unambiguous and clear before data collection, according to PRISMA. And there must be methods for data extraction and synthesis that are pre-described and spelled out according to PRISMA. There's also a focus on the risk of bias in the literature that is incorporated into a systematic review, so that their efforts ensured in the PRISMA protocol to ensure that the best available evidence is used, particularly for recommending practice. What I'm showing here is an example of a PRISMA flow diagram. And this PRISMA flow diagram is the most basic diagram. There are others that involve other forms of literature, but this one focuses on databases and registers only. And what you see here is that the flow diagram, it's really kind of a way to portray the results of one's search, inclusion, exclusion, and final tally of articles that are included in the study. It includes areas to document how many databases were searched initially, how many registers were searched. It also allows for the transparency of the total number of records that were initially captured when search terms were entered into certain registries and databases. Then it also accounts here and portrays to readers what was excluded, whether there were studies that were excluded because they were duplicates, or because they didn't meet specific eligibility criteria, or because they just weren't relevant to the study. There are places on the PRISMA flow diagram to detail all the reasons for exclusion, as well as the number of articles excluded. And so what one winds up with at the bottom here, after one walks through the process of data collection, applying their inclusion and exclusion criteria, documenting the reasons for exclusions, what one winds up with here at the end is a total number of studies that were focused on and where from within data were applied to address the research questions. Okay, so I only have a couple more slides, and then we'll just open this up for conversations, questions, and answers. But there are a couple of terms, a couple of sort of think tanks or resources on systematic reviews that I do believe are necessary to highlight. And the first is Cochrane. Okay, the Cochrane collaboration nowadays is simply known as Cochrane. It's an international independent organization. Their whole goal is to provide high quality evidence-based information to inform healthcare decisions. They're renowned for their systematic reviews of primary research. So they not only conduct systematic reviews, but they also are involved in registering protocols. Their mission, as you can see below, is to produce and disseminate systematic reviews of healthcare interventions to help clinicians, patients, and all these stakeholders make informed decisions. And they also want to ensure that healthcare decisions are informed by high quality, relevant, and up-to-date evidence. So quality is key. What else I can tell you about the Cochrane collaboration is they maintain a registry of protocols. So when I was talking earlier about the PRISMA P and how it can be used to help register one's protocol, there are standards on the PRISMA P that allow one to register with something known as Prospero. And Prospero is a warehouse of evidence review or systematic review protocols. The Cochrane collaboration is keenly involved in that. The other big think tank that I think is important to know about in the field of evidence synthesis research is JBI, which stands for the Joanna Briggs Institute. This is an Australia-based institute run out of the University of Adelaide. They're renowned for their focus on evidence-based healthcare, particularly in developing methodologies for systematic reviews. So where they differ from Cochrane in that Cochrane completes systematic reviews, and they also have a library of systematic reviews, JBI produces the evidence synthesis manual. And literally, it is like a textbook for how to conduct all kinds of evidence synthesis approaches, from systematic reviews to other types of reviews that go beyond the scope of this presentation, including umbrella reviews and other forms, narrative reviews and other forms of systematic review. They're a leading institution in evidence-based healthcare. They provide robust methodology tools. They also have a list of tools, right? So they have additional checklists and tools particularly relevant to evaluating the quality of research studies. So, for example, they have one tool known as grade, which allows a researcher to kind of weight a particular study based on its methodology type, based on the strength of evidence, based on the risk of bias, so that one, in forming recommendations from a systematic review, can be cautious in terms of making particularly practice recommendations based on low quality evidence or high quality evidence. So that evaluation and appraisal of the evidence is something Joanna Briggs Institute feels strongly about, so much so that they not only have a methodological handbook that they make available, but they also have tools for critical appraisal that they produce as well. So, in summary, systematic literature reviews incorporate meta-analyses. They incorporate qualitative systematic literature reviews. They incorporate integrative systematic literature reviews. And there are tools available to help guide researchers such as PRISMA through developing a methodological protocol that ensures that systematic reviews are transparent, rigorous, and that findings from the reviews are valid and reliable. And that concludes my brief presentation today on evidence synthesis in the systematic literature review. Do you have any questions?
I have one question for you, Eric.
Hi, Robert.
For this type programs that are business doctoral level programs, what is your recommendation to use? What system? Cochrane, the PRISMA, the meta-analysis? The question is because these type of programs are short, and I believe this type of literature review is going to take a little time. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, I believe that all systematic reviews that are conducted here at United States University should follow a PRISMA protocol. So the protocol should follow PRISMA P or the PRISMA 2020. If I would suggest, though, that if recommendations are clinical in nature, so in nursing, I would recommend use of the PRISMA 2020. And I would recommend for doctoral research in the medical field that systematic review protocols be registered with Prospero. The JBI Institute and Cochrane are very clinically focused. So their real focus is on systematic reviews and offering guidance for the health sciences. When you take a field like education or business, we were talking about social sciences or practical applications, I don't think that Cochrane or JBI are necessarily applicable to those kinds of reviews. Nevertheless, the PRISMA P was intended to be used for reviews regardless of the field. And so what you'll see on PRISMA P are standards that would be relevant to a systematic review, whether it's in the health sciences or whether it's in education or business. So, and in terms of doctoral research, I can just give you an example, right? So in our DBA program that we have in the College of Business and Technology, we're steering our students to one of three types of methodology, systematic review being one of them, or a archival data analysis, or a case study, right? And so right now we have learners coming or students coming through our doctoral programs, and they have an option at the end where they can select what kind of research study they want to do. We're seeing many of our students gravitate towards the systematic literature review. We developed a research methods course that's specifically aligned for every type of research project, all three: case study, archival data analysis, and systematic review. The research methods course for those students who elect to do a systematic review essentially walks them through each of the 11 items 6 through 17 of the PRISMA P, and they formulate those responses based on their research topic in advance of beginning to enter the systematic doctoral project phase, where they actually begin writing chapters 1 through 4 of their doctoral project. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, the last part of your answer is great, because I part of the program teaching PDA. It's good to have a course that they're gonna guide the students what type of research they're gonna do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Muenks, there are
Yes.
a number of participants that have expressed their thanks and found your presentation very interesting. I do have a question in the chat. What are the most common pitfalls or mistakes you have seen from doctoral students conducting their literature reviews?
Okay, I love this question. I feel sometimes like a broken record when I'm guiding systematic review researchers through their second and third chapters. So one of the most common pitfalls that I see is that even if I explain to a learner from the very onset of their topic development that, you know, chapter 2 is different from a systematic literature review, that they serve different purposes, I still come across learners who, after they've written chapter 2, they think the intent of the review of the related literature, which is what we call the second chapter in a doctoral project, they think that that is the systematic review, that they've completed the study, right? And of course, as we know, right, we do chapter 2 before we even get the IRB to approve our systematic review protocol. So that's one thing. So as I mentioned, I feel like a broken record sometimes, constantly reminding students that their intent of chapter 2 really is to update your reader on the status of literature on your topic, and you follow an outline, more or less, that you develop in conjunction with your chair, that is not systematic in any way, right? So you don't spell out the protocol in advance other than you may have an outline of terms that you want to look deeper into, or areas of your topic that you want to flesh out research. But again, the intent is not to answer research questions. The intent is really to provide a foundation of literature to support your topic and project, and really to update. The intent is to update readers on what literature has been conducted and what's the status of the most current literature out there. So what you'll find in a second chapter, which is basically a narrative literature review, are summaries of research studies, as well as highlights of sort of disagreements within the field among researchers. So there's synthesis of what's out there. But again, the goal is to update readers on the status of the topic. So I often have to remind learners, hey, so sometimes I'll see them writing their third chapter in the past tense on the first go. And so I sometimes have to remind readers, you don't do the systematic review until after you gain IRB approval. And the main difference really between chapter 2 and a systematic review is all about that predetermined protocol, right? So in a systematic review, you have your research problem, you have research questions, and your research questions then inform keywords, and you spell out all your anticipated keywords, those words that you'll enter into search databases in advance, so that a reader, so the IRB can see this is where you intend to focus, your chair can see this is where you intend to focus, they can pinpoint any gaps, maybe you need to include this search term, for example. But it's the sort of pre-planning that really differentiates a systematic review from a narrative review or the second chapter. Other things that I find problematic are just the differentiation between what is a qualitative systematic literature review. So as I mentioned, in an integrative systematic literature review, you can perform one thematic analysis or one form of analysis to look at quantitative research as well as qualitative research. But sometimes learners and even doctoral faculty will encourage their learner to search for quantitative and qualitative studies and do a thematic analysis, but they think that it's the thematic analysis that should drive the definition of the study as a qualitative systematic literature review. And really, it's the exclusion and inclusion of the kind of research that differentiates a qualitative systematic literature review from an integrative literature review. Again, the qualitative review only focuses on prior qualitative research to the exclusion of anything else, whereas an integrative review includes all kinds of previous research, and there's one thematic analysis to integrate findings from all of those studies. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions in the chat at this point. Thank you so much. This was very helpful. We really appreciate it.
Right.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for everyone's questions and time.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
All right, you as well.
Sir.